Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we're going to be talking about a very, very, very interesting subject, an important one. We've been seeing all over the United States, all over the West, lots of protests, pro-Hamas protests over the past few months since October 7th. And one of the things that people have been trying to understand is what is the glue that holds together white, privileged Americans or Europeans and the Islamists? Why are the Queers for Palestine protesting with the jihadis? And it seems to me that it's an important question to ask. And so the tying together why all these people are together is the talk of the oppressed and the oppressor mentality. There's always, according to these people, an oppressor. There's always an oppressed in every single situation in life, including this one. And so if the Palestinians are considered the oppressed, then Israel must be the oppressor. And so that is what's happening here. But where does this come from? Why do people think this way? Why are they indoctrinated in such a way? And how does it happen? And so today we're going to speak with Kiyah Willis. Kiyah is a fellow at the Objective Standard Institute, and she's someone who, if you listen to her to her videos and read her posts on X and TikTok, you understand that she grew up in school and in a house, and the way she grew up in, grew up in an identity politics mentality where the same type of thing, victim mentality, oppressed, oppressor. She goes to MIT, and as she says in her videos and writing, she also there are DEI programs, and she's really taught to be woke, quote unquote, to be oppressed, to be that she's the oppressed, that there's an oppressor, the white people, the white males around her. And then Kiyah slowly but surely over time understands that something is deeply flawed in this ideology, and she changes the way she thinks. And so that is why it is very important for us to talk to people like Kiyah, because that is the only way we'll be able to understand this type of mentality and how to, at the end of the day, combat it and change people's hearts and minds. Kiyah Willis, it's a great honor and pleasure to talk to you, and welcome to the Western Spirit.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start before everything. I've been watching some of your videos and reading some of your tweets. I'm not on TikTok, I must say, but I heard you have a big following over there, but that's not me. And one of the things that comes out to me is that you keep on saying about your past and the way your views evolved is that because of where you came from, and where you grew up, the atmosphere around you, and also in university, there's like really no way, it seems to me, to not be indoctrinated, or if that's the right word, into a mentality of how would you call it, like a woke mentality, sort of what we see in campuses today. And maybe I've been seeing it for years, but we've sort of seeing the climax of it since October 7th. So maybe if I can ask you why does it seem that some people are more inclined to be indoctrinated into this view and others maybe not so much?
Yes, and yeah, I would call it probably wokeness. I know that that's maybe a controversial term, but that's kind of the way that I would describe it. Why do some people seem to be more inclined to be indoctrinated? Um, I think it really depends. There are, I think, a few different reasons why. I think that there are people who are indoctrinated into kind of I would call it kind of like the oppressed mindset that,
Yes.
there are some people, yeah, who are oppressors and then the people who are victims. I think there are some people who are kind of indoctrinated into it based on guilt, I would say. People who are raised from a really young age being told, because you were born into a certain group or you have certain things or your family is a certain way or you were born in a certain place, that makes you a bad person. And I think that a lot of people internalize that guilt. And then on the flip side, you have people who are kind of raised in this kind of mentality of jealousy, I think, of being told because you, again, were born in a certain group or have certain things or are from a certain place, that you should be angry at people who have things that are different than what you have or where you were born or things. So I think that it kind of depends on which group you or maybe were kind of raised in. If you were raised in the group where you're told you're supposed to be guilty, or raised in the group where
Yeah.
you're told you're supposed to be jealous. But I think those are the two kind of mindsets or psychologies that lead to the woke mentality.
And where tell us where you came from in terms of that. Where was that how was the dynamic where you were growing up?
Yes, mine was definitely on the side of you should be angry and jealous. So
Who
as you
should you
can,
be angry at, jealous of?
yeah. So yeah, as you can see, I'm a Black woman. And so for me, being when I was where I was raised, I was told because you're a woman, you should be angry at men because, look, there's a male president and there are more men in certain fields and things, and because of that, you should be angry because you will never be able to achieve these things because you're a woman. And then same
Hmm.
thing with my race. I'm a racial minority in the US, and so it's because there are so many more white people around you. They're always going to have more than you and have more opportunities. And because of that, you should be angry. It's so unfair. And just from my experience, like growing up and I guess to where I am now, that hasn't been the case. And I'm very lucky that I'm in a country where that's not the case, where I feel like I've had as many opportunities as, anybody of another skin color or as the men around me. I say pretty well for myself. But those facts I kind of was told to ignore. You've gone to a really good school, you've had all these great opportunities, and you have a good job, but you're still supposed to be angry. And even though none of these things that you're being told is true, you're still supposed to be angry, and you're supposed to, yeah, just be jealous and
Yeah.
look at these people who are different than you, and want them to not have things that are as good because of this really arbitrary hatred.
Yeah. I want to, before we get into why maybe this is, why we should encourage people to maybe think differently, just maybe understand why the oppressor mentality brings us vis-a-vis October 7th and the whole what's happening here in Israel and what we're seeing on all these campuses. So why do you think that it seems to me that if you accept this entire what you called woke, I agree, or identity politics maybe is another word for it, or the intersectional coalitions that are being built, and you have the more oppressed you are, the better, the more privileges you get, etc. So why does that seem to come with a sort of hatred of Israel? It seems to me, at least that's what we're seeing here. So, like, for example, I've been seeing everybody says the Israelis are the white colonialists, and the Palestinians, for example, are the, I guess, people of color, and they're the indigenous people, which is like another sort of intersectionality on the world stage. So you're also a person of color, you're also indigenous to the land, you're also, I guess, oppressed because I'm not exactly sure, but anyway. And then when you say, for example, I have friends who are Arabs in the army that were with me, or most of Israelis are not white, they're not of European descent. It used to be. Now most of Israelis are from Arab countries that were thrown out of the Arab countries in the past. So if there was an ethnic cleansing, look at that. And then the response seems to be, we don't care about the facts. This is what we believe in. And so maybe you could just explain to us, first of all, why it's like a package. So if you're all these things, you're also more likely to hate Israel. And number two, why do the facts seem to not even comport? Why do the facts just go right over the heads of people like this?
Yeah, I think that it's the reason why people hate Israel is because Israel is a very successful country. I mean, if just to put it very bluntly,
Yeah,
Israel has the culture of Israel has created this very prosperous society. You see all of these, amazing startups and innovation, and people there are just very happy, and or seemed to, I mean, before the war at least, seemed to be very happy and doing well for themselves. Um, and I think when you have this mindset that everybody is either inherently, again, like oppressed or an oppressor, then you can't explain why one country, the country of Israel versus the territories in the West Bank and Gaza are, they're not doing as well. It can't be because there's a different culture or because there are different decisions being made there. It
yeah,
has to be because there's this oppressor oppressed dichotomy. And yeah, then I think that's why, again, people are like you said, ignoring the facts around this because they can't comprehend that, oh, maybe there's other reasons other than these two options of oppressor oppressed. Maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe there's, decisions being made by these different countries, the way that the
Yeah.
governments are run, the cultures that are creating these differences.
It seems to me also that even let's say we take and just tell me what you think about it. That let's say I find it interesting to talk to you because I'll just say before I ask my question that you reading about your story and listening to some of your videos, you grew up in and also in MIT where you went. The way you were taught and the way you explained what you were taught is basically what all these people are talking about. And so and you're not there. So it's interesting looking back through you about the way these people think. And it seems that when people go to college or university, the whole point is to learn and to sort of, you know, think differently about things, take in all the perspectives, open your mind. But almost what happens is, at least for a lot of people, is that they close their minds. They're taught a certain dichotomy, like you said, about oppressed and oppressor, and there's no nuance to anything at that point because all the stories are oppressed versus oppressor. There's no complex issues. Everything is under that specific dichotomy. And does that when you look back at the way you studied at MIT and these all these DEI departments, I assume there was one there, do you look back and say, did they teach you to think critically or the opposite?
Oh, it was absolutely the opposite. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. As you said, they did have a DEI department, and the DEI department definitely did say, if you're this race or if you're a woman, you are being oppressed, even by your fellow students, even though you go to the same school, you're taking the same classes,
Yeah.
and you're probably going to have the same jobs coming out. Um, and yeah, a lot of the professors had that mindset, and then of course the students as well. So it was definitely like very much an echo chamber of just people
Wow.
repeating the same things over and over again, that this was how the world was. And I think that there were people who were there who probably didn't believe this and were, uh, you know, just a bit more rational. But the people who were, I think, were afraid to speak out at times because of the culture in the DEI departments, and that sometimes there were um, consequences to,
Like what?
rejecting it.
Could
Yeah.
you
So
explain to us what the kind yeah.
yes. So back when I was very woke, I one of the things I used to do was report people to the DEI department for microaggressions, which is when you're like accidentally offensive in some way. And so if you were part of one of these oppressor groups and you accidentally offended someone who was oppressed, then you could end up with certain disciplinary actions. One thing I almost, and I'm telling on myself a little bit, but I feel like I'm an example of kind of how these people would think when I was in this mindset. But
Hmm.
I tried to get a student group shut down because the president of the group said something that I was offended by. So, and then,
What did he say, if I can ask?
yeah, so it was a really silly thing. It was a theater group that I was a part of. And they were doing casting for the show, and I didn't agree with the casting that they did because they cast a white person in a role that previously wasn't a white person in the original show. And when I said, I was like, this is a tragedy that you would cast a white person in this role, and he was like, that I don't think that race matters in this case. And saying I don't think that race matters made me very angry. And so I went to the DEI department, and I launched a full investigation into the theater group because there was racism amok, because the president said that he didn't care about race when it came to casting for the show. So
Wow.
yeah.
So I just so I understand, it wasn't the whole point of. I remember when I grew up in Brooklyn, in New York, and I grew up in an ultra Orthodox Jewish family, so it's very different than where you are. But my father was a social studies teacher and not in a public school, and one of the things that everybody thought was Martin Luther King's big speech, "I have a dream," And the whole point of the whole speech, which is an amazing speech, is that we want a colorblind society. Now, if you say want a colorblind society, you're a racist, right?
Yes.
It's funny to say so, but it is true. Um, so, uh, is that the mindset of just young people, or do you think it's already a mindset in a lot of just regular, even people who are outside of college?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that most of my experience has been with people who are around my age, and I'm Gen Z. And it definitely is, I would say, the dominant mindset for people who are around my age. But I have also seen a lot of people who are in the older generations as well. And like I said, a lot of the professors when I was in school also
Yeah.
were a lot, yeah, very much in this mentality. So, and yeah, I don't know how much they would be representative of, most people in the country, but given that they are supposed to
Exactly.
be at the, top universities, these like smart PhD professors was still very concerning for me.
So let's go into, so you finish I assume you finished MIT. What did you study? Could I just ask because I'm just curious?
Yes, I studied data science.
Uh, so you finish that. It's this prestigious university. You're very woke. That's what that you just said about yourself. You're telling on people, and you're in this whole mindset. And now you're in the objective standard, which is objective place of Ayn Rand type of thing, not type of thing. It's the Ayn Rand ideology, um, and you're very not woke, to put it mildly. And you're talking about what happened.
Yeah, well, I guess in probably the last year of university, I had just a few experiences where I realized, oh, something's very wrong in the way that I'm thinking. Like reality and just what I'm seeing with my own eyes, especially when it comes to the people who are around me, who I'm told are supposed to be these terrible, evil oppressors. This is just not aligning with what I've been told. And so it was like, okay, I have one of two options. Either one, I can continue to ignore reality, in which case it was making me miserable at the time. And I continue to be unhappy because I'm pretending that, what I'm seeing isn't true. Or I can adjust the way that I'm thinking and reject what I've been told. And that was tricky because that's all I had kind of been told for most of my life. And rejecting that was meant, well, what do I think now? If I don't believe in oppressed or oppressed, then what is true? But,
Exactly.
but yeah, I kind of made that decision that I'm going to look at what's going on, actually start to think, and maybe come to a conclusion that's different than what I was raised with. And then that's kind of the mindset that I went with and how I ended up here.
And did you right away go to, I guess, objectivism, or how did you jump from being in a sort of oppressed mindset to a person who understands, like me? Maybe I don't think I'm an objectivist, but I do understand the value of freedom and free markets and freedom of speech, which we don't have on campus at all, and all that. And from that to that, how did you make the jump to where you are now? It's a big leap.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And I think it started with me understanding just individualism as like kind of a fundamental philosophic
Yeah.
principle. So understanding that, yeah, this idea of clumping people into groups and then judging them based on these group aspects versus individuals is leading me to some very incorrect assumptions. Like I said, there were some people in my life who were considered oppressors, some white men. Oh my gosh. And but some of them were
Evil.
like, yeah, awful. But they were
Yeah.
very nice to me, and I started to make like friends with some of these people I went to school with, and I realized, wait a second, I've been told you are like evil incarnate, but you're actually very nice. Like, what is happening? Um, and I don't know, I guess I started to realize, like, I myself wouldn't want to be judged the way that I have been judging other people. And so maybe, the way to go about things is, yeah, to actually get to know people, to judge them based on their own actions and things. And
Yeah.
that's how I should determine whether they're good people or not, or whether I want to be friends with them or associated with them or not. And I think that beginning foundation of, individuals are their own people
Right.
was how I got into a lot of other things, into the liberty movement of, okay, well, if individuals are their own people and then have their own minds and their own lives, then maybe, the government shouldn't be putting some of these very broad policies over everyone when, some one person's life is different than another person's life, one person's decisions are different, one person's morals are different. Maybe people should have more freedom to, be themselves and be their own individual person. And so that was, I guess, how I got more uh, into the liberty movement and then eventually into the objectivist movement.
That's amazing. I have to say, it is amazing. It's like when I was growing up, I was sort of I'd say a rebel because I grew up in an ultra Orthodox family. I had the whole, the garb, the hat, the jacket, the beard, the whole thing. And when I was a teen, I came to Israel at the age of 15 by myself to be in a dorm here in a yeshiva, a religious school. And after a year, they threw me out because I was a little bit nuts. And then I stayed in Israel by myself and basically went to the army and everything and did my I guess the equivalent of GEDs, even though in America and in Israel we didn't study any any anything but religious studies. So I decided to do it by myself. And I think looking back, I could definitely make myself a victim in the sense that, you look back and, oh, look at all these bad hands that I was handed, and I grew up without studying, and then at the age of 29, I lost my eyesight and I'm legally blind now. And look at it. It's so easy to fall back on just feeling sorry for yourself. And when a whole society is teaching people to just I guess the word is revel in their victimhood, it's so it's like it's not good, it's so unhealthy. And like you said, do you think that you said that it was making you miserable? And my question is, do you think woke culture makes people miserable? Like, do you think that when someone is immersed in this wokeness, all around him people are thinking and trying to show how much they're victims, that he internalizes the fact that he's always going to be a victim?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when you think that because of some unchosen characteristic, you are just incapable of doing well for yourself, that can absolutely lead to some, very negative thoughts about yourself and your ability and uh, just, yeah, negative thoughts about your future and where you're going to end up in life. Um, and then there's also the side which I think also makes people very unhappy, which is
Yeah.
this fear of offending people and this fear of saying the wrong thing. That was something I struggled with a lot, where I was constantly watching every word that I said so carefully because I was afraid of accidentally hurting someone's feelings. And so I think when you have that combination of thinking that you're, inherently you're not going to become anything, and then also even in like your interpersonal relationships you could hurt everybody around you by accidentally saying the wrong thing. Like, you can't really have good relationships or friendships, and then you don't think that you can achieve much career wise and in other areas of your life. Yeah, you just have a very negative outlook on your entire existence at that point, because what are you even doing if everything around you is just going to go terribly and you believe that there's nothing you can do to change it?
Yeah, there's almost it's so sad. It's like you believe that there's no free will also because
Yeah.
everything is you're born, let's say you in your case black, and so that means that you're always going to be, I guess, what's the like a victim, and like you said, a victim or a oppressor, and you're always going to be the oppressed, not the oppressor. I'm not sure that it's better to be. I don't know what it's better to be because on the like, it's better to say that you're the oppressed, I guess. Anyway, um, my next what I wanted to ask is that you came out after, I don't know if after October 7th or even before. I wasn't I don't the chronological order, but what made you, it seems to me you're really passionate about this. You're really right. You write a lot about Israel. You came out in lots of videos and on Twitter. I think I saw you the first time saying why I support Israel, and you wrote a long thing about it. So what made you so, why was this? Because it's I think it's become very contentious, and in the US, it's very scary a lot of times to come out and put your views out on things that are so far away from you. Why did you feel so strongly that you needed to come out and be outspoken about this?
Yeah, I think there are probably two reasons. One that came first was seeing the crazy amount of anti-Semitism that came out after October 7th. Because all of my work before October 7th was about individualism and treating people as individuals, and seeing how many people would just straight up uh, pretending like October 7th never happened, or defending Hamas and the things that happened, and very obviously coming from a place of hating Jewish people. Like, that for me was so disgusting and disturbing. And I, even coming from people who were woke and seeing that, I just didn't understand like how some of the things people were saying could even register to them as being a positive or a good thing. So that was, I think, what first got me so invested. Was, out of all of the conflicts happening in the world, there were people who were so anti-Israel and so aggressively anti-Semitic, and I didn't understand why that was the case.
Hmm.
I think fault kind of second to that, and after I did a lot more research into what happened, the history of Israel and Hamas, and more of the Middle East in general, is just seeing this greater war with Iran and its proxies, and how they're threatening the US as well. And I'm going, well, if Israel doesn't win this war, they keep saying they're going to come after me. So, this is something that I think more people in America should be very, very against, Hamas
Well,
winning, Iran
yeah.
having more power, things like that. So, yeah, I think one, seeing what Hamas did, just being very disgusted by that, and then seeing the reactions of people in America celebrating it, and then Iran and Hamas saying that they're going to do that same thing to me. Those two things made me very, very passionate about this whole topic.
And have you received, because you have, I think, y- could we say that since you started really speaking out on Twitter, X, and YouTube, that your platform has been growing? Because I see that you're becoming a lot more. It seems to me a lot more followers. So with that, has the pushback against you also been stronger? So have you been getting like very disgusting messages like other people I know have been getting, and threats and all that kind of stuff that comes with it?
Yes, I definitely have. I was supposed to speak at an event at King's College in London a few months ago, and the event was canceled because me and one of the speakers I was supposed to be doing this presentation with got so many death threats, people saying that they were going to commit jihad against the university, and that they were going to find us and behead us, and all of this
Wow.
craziness. So yeah, things have been a little bit scary in that sense. Definitely a lot of hate. But yeah, I guess in a way, I see that as a good thing, in the sense that I think I'm making the right people angry. I think that anyone who wants to
Exactly.
blow up a school, if they're my enemies, then I think I'm on the right side. So yeah.
Yeah, I find it very weird that on the one hand you have people saying there was this operation that rescued the four hostages now like a week ago, and you had, so I keep the Shabbat, so we didn't look at the news, and then we open the TV after Shabbat and we suddenly see four hostages were released, and we're so happy. And then I open Twitter or X, and you see people are so angry that how dare the Israelis want to release their people, and they killed all these people, and there were, and they didn't have to be hostages in the first place. It's like it's very weird, the entire ecosystem of people who, it's sort of an alliance of Islamists, like you said, people wanted to do jihad against you, for example, and on the other hand, people like Queers for Palestine. It's like the jihadists obviously don't really like the Queers for Palestine, but the Queers for Palestine seem to be very blinded and don't realize this. So I don't know if you saw the video from the Pride Parade in Philadelphia where the the Pride Parade was trying to go through, and then the pro-Palestinian marchers were blocking the Pride Parade. And I thought that was like a sort of microcosm of where we are, where one side is using the other side to promote its ideals, but once let's say it gets Israel, they'll go after the other ones. So I think
Yeah.
that's where we are on. Just tell me, how do you even approach people who are of a mindset that like Queers for Palestine? That's the extreme example, but there's a lot of people on the spectrum.
Yeah. And I mean, the Queers for Palestine is exactly what we were talking about earlier with the oppressed oppressor
Yes.
situation, right? Like they can't even see past, oh, people in Gaza are poor, and it's like, well, they want to kill you. Do you realize this? But they don't have as much money as Israel. There's more to this. Um, but yeah, how do you approach those people? I've had this question asked a lot, like, how do you, help people see what they're supporting is so bad for them and bad for the world? And
Yeah.
I think I think it's kind of hard to say this, but I think that for so many people, they don't care about facts and reality, that it's almost impossible to change their
Yes.
mind, because you can't show someone facts that are against what they believe if they don't care about facts in the first place. That's not going to change their minds. So I think that for the people who you said are very far gone, kind of on the maybe extreme side of the spectrum, I think for them it's going to be kind of up to them to first decide that facts are important. And I think that it's possible. And for some of them, it might mean coming to a
You
really
did
hard
it.
realization.
Yeah. I said you did
Right.
it too.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah, and I did it because I ended up very, very depressed and in a really dark place. And I hope that most people don't have to get to that point before they change their minds. But I think for some people, they're going to have to perhaps go through something or see something really hard for them to change their mind. Uh,
yeah.
but for some of the people who I guess maybe you would consider more in the middle, maybe who are a bit more uninformed, aren't so militantly like, I don't care about reality, this is what I believe. Probably the best thing that we could do for them is to inform them. And that's why I try to be vocal on social media platforms, to spread some of the facts, to maybe bring a bit more of the moral clarity, to say things that other people are maybe a little bit more afraid to say. Because I think for some of those people who are just maybe in the echo chambers and have never been exposed to anything else, just hearing somebody say something that they've never heard before can maybe spring that light bulb of, oh, maybe what people are saying around me isn't true. So I
Yeah.
think that just having those voices out there to, share the facts, hopefully those people who have already come to the conclusion that facts do matter and maybe they just don't know what they are, can realign what they believe once they understand the reality of the situation.
I hope you're right. I really do. I don't know. Sometimes it seems so depressing just looking at. But on the other hand, when we see the polls of of Americans, so a lot of the voices that we hear, we then understand they really are in the minority, and
Mhm.
so that's encouraging. And we see the European, like the Eurovision, for example, like a silent majority. Suddenly, the Israeli girl gets all the votes from all these countries that their politicians don't really like us. So you have different, I guess, signs that maybe the loudest ones are not the majority, and I think that's encouraging. I want to ask you something that I read not too long ago about. You mentioned in the beginning that you were taught that because of your skin color, your race, therefore you must be, I guess, the oppressed, and the white people are all rich. I don't remember how you phrased it. I'm paraphrasing, and I wanted to ask you then. I said, "Well, let it go," but then I'll ask later on. But isn't it true? Meaning, it could be that there isn't an oppressor oppressed reality, but isn't it true that Black Americans are more likely to be poor, let's say, or more likely? And one of the big examples we would see in later years is by police brutality and all these kind of things. So, how do you look at it from? You don't want to be an oppressed oppressor mentality. You want to look at it. You want to be an individual. On the other hand, how do you look at the actual issues that are raised individually each issue?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So
Thanks.
I think that the looking at it as so I'm a data scientist. That was my or at least what I
Yeah.
studied at MIT. So I love talking about statistics because I think that a lot of times people will take a statistic and they'll use it to just as for an entire group, that the statistic, whatever the statistic shows, it must be true for every single person and demographic. And like I said earlier, I'm Black and I'm doing pretty well, I would say. I'm definitely not living in like the stereotypical inner city, gang written violence type of area. Um, and so when you're looking at someone like me who's doing fairly well, and then maybe someone like my dad grew up in one of those areas, um and you look maybe at him growing up and how did he end up there, or why did he end up in the situation. I think that it does start by looking at individuals. So why was it these two things? Now if there is, say, a policy that says all of the Black people need to live in this area, then that is a government problem, and that was the
Right.
case less than 100 years ago with Jim Crow laws in the US, where there were certain areas where they said you have to live here, you can't have these jobs, you can't do these things. But now those laws aren't there anymore. So I think there has to be more of a look into maybe individual decisions, maybe cultural things, or maybe there is, racism in certain instances, but those racism is probably more, again, at the individual level of individual people being racist and not all white people or government policy or something like that. And so I think that judging these situations more individually, of looking at, okay, if this person is in the situation because of racism, is it because an individual person or maybe a small group of people were being, racist towards them, or is it because of a policy? And in the US,
Right.
there aren't any policies, so I would say that that's not something that would be causing this. But there's so many different reasons as to why some people, regardless of race, are poor or not poor, that it's much more complicated than just to say, it's white people versus Black people, I would say. It's a similar thing with the police brutality
I can't believe you're
situation.
saying this. You're like a white supremacist.
I
No.
know.
No.
Apparently so.
Yeah,
But yeah, I would
I
just
wanted to
say,
just maybe ask you one thing about this. There's now I guess, mini controversy. There's a congressman. I assume you heard about this, from Florida. He's a Black congressman. I think his name is Byron Donalds, and he said in some event that since Jim Crow was over, since the civil rights movement, but then he explained that he was talking about since the policies of the Great Society of LBJ that basically made the welfare state much bigger and more prominent and poured money into all these government programs, the fatherless rate among Black Americans is like extremely higher than it was before. Poverty rates, I think, went up. His point was that the welfare system in America is incentivizing out of wedlock children, and that affected the Black community more than other communities. And then they made it out like he said, I don't know the guy, so, but they made it out like he said that Jim Crow was a good thing, which is a very weird thing to read it. I saw his full words. So, but my point is, do you agree? You talked about government policies. I assume you agree because you're an objectivist, that the welfare system in America really hurts minorities, and especially minorities, but everyone.
yes. I think that that's a complicated, kind of complicated, I guess, just throwing out my views on
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I definitely think that welfare is bad because it does incentivize poverty, and it incentivizes people not to want to do better for themselves. At the same time, I also believe that no one's forcing anyone to be on welfare, in the sense that you can always do better for yourself and work
That's
to
true.
not need it anymore. And so I think that, yes, in a sense, welfare is bad because, yes, it incentivizes some maybe not great decisions, But then on the other side, I think that to blame welfare maybe entirely, and I'm not entirely sure about exactly what this person said, but I have heard some people who have blamed welfare almost entirely for poverty in a lot of areas, and I think that that also takes away, as you said earlier, the free will of people to,
Yes.
change their circumstances and to not be on welfare and to have better jobs and live in better areas. So
I agree. So we could agree that what you're saying is we could agree that maybe welfare policies are not good. On the other hand, everyone has agency. Even though something is incentivizing you to do one thing, you should be able to overcome those incentives and do what's good for you in the long run. I, I, I could say for myself, I'll just give an example I always give, that when I lost my eyesight, they took me to the hospital has like a room where people are getting you're hearing the bad news, something bad's going to happen to you. And then they have this room where you meet this counselor from the Social Security equivalent of Israel. And she told me, you should stop working. And I said, why? And she said, because that way you'll get the full welfare check for being handicapped. And I said, what do you mean? I'm less than 30. I'm under 30. What am I going to do with my whole life? I'm just going to stare at the wall. And she said, I don't care what you do with your life. You want the welfare check. My job is to explain to you how to get it. You should leave your job. So I said, not going to take the check. And I continued working. And then I got married and I have 2 kids now and the third on the way. So, it's just, like you said, you could be, my incentive at the time was obviously to maybe take the check, but I decided not to. So everyone has the decision to make how to approach things. I
yeah,
wanted to also ask you one thing that I saw in one of your videos lately was that when you opened the video about Israel, you had people on the left like AOC and I don't remember who else. And on the other hand, you opened with right after Alex Jones and all these, and maybe a few other people like that. And so I wanted to maybe ask if you could, what you seem to be saying also in other videos is that the right in America is not maybe the answer to what we're seeing on the left. So maybe explain what you see are the trends on the right that are worrying in and of themselves.
yes, I see a lot of. Well, I don't really like to use the terms like right versus left. Um, yeah, I believe that they're kind of most people who are kind of considered right are actually agree with the left on a lot of issues, and yeah, Israel is probably one of them. And I think it's because I think that the maybe not exactly the oppressed oppressor dichotomy, but definitely viewing people as groups and judging people based on groups is something that I see more and more coming out of kind of the American conservative movement. Um, and it's not as individualist as I think that sometimes some of the people like claim to be. And so that's something that's definitely concerning to me, is that they were kind of being proposed with these two options, either one side, which is very collectivist and views people in groups, and then the other side, which is also collectivist and views people in groups. And maybe they just view the different
Yeah.
groups slightly differently, but it's kind of the same fundamental idea that, where you were born or the race that you have or your sex or something, these are supposed to determine everything that you do for your life or the outcomes of your life. And I think that there needs to be an alternative that is, yeah, individualism. That is, people are individuals and we should create government policy and a culture that is based on that. And I just don't see either the woke people or kind of the American conservatives, either side really being the champions of that idea.
So what is the solution? In America, it's almost like a binary position. I mean, there is the Libertarian Party or there is third party candidates all the time, but they don't really, I don't think really nobody's even, I don't think they themselves are expecting to win. So
Yeah.
uh, when you have like a binary choice, which is, I think, very bad. On the other hand, we have too much choices like here. It's also very bad. In our election, you have like 50 parties but and like 30 of them get in, so it's like a big cake of people and no one knows who's good and who's bad. But when you have a binary position, what can the regular person on the streets, if I can so to speak, what can you do, how do you look at, how are you, for example, looking at there's an election. I'm not going to ask you who you're voting for. That's not the issue. How do you look at a binary choice like that?
Well, I guess, first, what the kind of individual random person on the street can do is I think that we need just a massive cultural change in the US. I think that the fact that both of these two candidates are our choices is a sign that our society's got some issues. If these are the two most popular people, so we need to start changing people's minds at the lower level that we don't need, this doesn't have to be the way that it is. We can put better people up as candidates or put them in office. When it comes to the election coming up, I think it's that it really needs to be. It's so hard because they're both not great, but
Exactly.
the way that I've kind of approached thinking about it is thinking with, I guess, my highest values and what is the most important to me for someone in office, and just which candidate do I think portrays that better. And as in this situation where they both kind of are bad, maybe it doesn't make a ton of a difference. But that's how I would it's probably the best way to approach the situation. I think that, yeah, in the longer term, is that there has to be a change in the minds of the majority of Americans that, yeah, these two, recognizing that these two are not great and we deserve better and we can do better if we put our support behind people who are not them.
Yeah. I just say that before we go, that it seems to me that the fact, like you said, two octogenarians that are, one of them seems to be, and I think his own party is already admitting that he's like half senile. The other one's like screaming at everyone. We know who he is. So the fact that those are two candidates and there couldn't be just anyone other than that, the two parties, those are the two people that they brought. It seems to me that in terms of the American culture, it's like they don't have confidence. People don't have confidence in the next generations. So they have to keep these old people that are, I mean, I know old people. My grandparents are old. It's very sad. You see the decline. And instead of helping them, they're propping them up because they feel, it seems to me, so not confident that they can, not sure of themselves that they could bring someone that could do something. And it's actually very sad when a society is so scared of its own skin. And I think that ties in with our whole theme that a lot of this woke culture is people who are scared to talk, scared to do, scared to say, scared to offend, scared to have conversations. And so obviously you're not going to want to get into the fray. You're not going to want to, you're going to leave it up to those old people who aren't in the woke, even if they were, they forgot it already because they're so old. So, do you agree that it might be some of that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a fear of change. I think that's a large part of it. Yeah, I think that definitely putting up both of our candidates have both been president before. And there's something I think for people that is comforting about the familiar versus bringing in somebody who's younger, where you maybe don't know as much about what they're going to do, but it could be better.
Right.
But people are afraid of taking a chance on somebody who's maybe different, that things could be better. Yeah.
Kiyah, what do you want to say, freestyle, to our listeners and viewers in Israel? What's important for you to tell us?
To viewers in Israel, I guess I stand with you. As you've said in the polls, the majority of Americans, even though they're silent, stand with you guys as you're going through this right now. And I hope that more people in America are brave, become more brave to speak out and to vocally support you, but just know that you guys are not alone with what you're going through. And I guess some of my colleagues will continue to be vocal. And yeah, you guys, your country is amazing. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Kiyah. I just want to say that before we go, when are you going to come to Israel? We want to meet you.
I know. I was supposed to come in December, but with just the escalation of the conflict, it wasn't sure if it would be safe or where it would be safe to go. And so
Right.
I'm hoping to come out
When everything calms down.
Yeah, and things calm down. Or if I can, if I have the right, like someone who can help me navigate and make sure that I'm in a place that's relatively safe. But yes, I do want to come
So
out to Israel.
So you could keep in touch with me. I'll make sure that we can find you someone who will keep you safe because we know everyone here. So if you want, we could talk after. But either way, I just want to say that it was a pleasure talking to you. I think the subjects that we touched upon are very important because it explains a lot of the background of what we're seeing all over America and the West in general. I mean, I have friends in London who every Saturday night, not Saturday night, there's these giant protests, and and a lot of the protesters are not Islamists. They're white, college educated kids. And it's very, in the beginning, puzzling. Why are these people protesting with each other? What are their commonalities? And then talking with people like you, we understand. And maybe we can't change their mind, but we can explain and, change those people in the middle. So thank you so much for talking with us. And it's inspiring to talk also to someone who is willing to think about their suppositions about the world and change them. It's not something that you meet every day. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.